Righto, let's begin. Welcome to the July 2025 committee meetings of Dubbo Regional Council. I advise that Council is now web streaming its standing committees and council meetings live to the internet, and as such, all those present should refrain from making any defamatory statements. Your attendance at this meeting is your acceptance of the condition that your image may be recorded and streamed to the internet, as well as being retained in the archive of the recorded council meetings and standing committee meetings. Before we start tonight's committee meetings, we'd like to take a moment to remember Dubbo Regional Theatre and Convention Centre technical team leader Andrew Earl. Andrew passed away in hospital following a tragic incident at the theatre last Wednesday night. Andrew was a dedicated member of the DRTCC team and will be sadly missed. We extend our deepest condolences to his family, friends and colleagues. We will now have a minute's silence in memory of Andrew. I invite all those who are able to please stand for the minute's silence. Thank you. Thank you. Please take a seat. I'll now hand over to Councillor Butler for the continuation of the meeting.
I now open the July 2025 Infrastructure, Planning and Environment Committee meeting, the time being 5:32 p.m. Just call on a councillor for the welcome to country, please. Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Well, I'm going to stand. That's all right. Please join me in acknowledging that we gather tonight on the lands of the Wiradjuri people, the Tabaga Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present, particularly 50 years old, and give thanks for the opportunity to serve our community that has been forged by those who have gone before.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. If we could move to IPEC 25/41, leave of absence. I have a request for leave of absence from Councillor S. Chowdhury. Could I have a councillor to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Ivey, and a seconder, Councillor Black. I put the motion, electronic voting is now open. Does that start? Come on, kill it. There you go. Thank you. Electronic voting is now open. I now close the voting. And we declare the motion carried unanimous. Councillor Wells is attending by audio link. There's one then. That's all good. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare?
I do.
Thank you, Councillor Poynton.
So at IPEC 2544, and IPEC 2547. I have a significant non-pecuniary conflict of interest. I am friends with the Centre Manager, Mr James Wall, and although this will not affect my decision making, I will leave the room when these items are discussed to remove any perception of a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Toynton. Okay, let's move on to IPEC 2543, report of the Renewable Energy Zone Benefit Committee meeting 19th June 2025. Do I have a motion? Councillor Ivey, seconded by Councillor Wright. Councillor Ivey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, as we're aware, and I think it has been mentioned before, this is a very important committee of council. We're at the cusp of the development of renewable energy in our region, and there are both benefits and some costs which are associated with that transition to renewables. It has, in some ways, to some extent divided the community, but I think this committee is not to debate the pros and cons of renewable energy development. It's there to help steer council in the allocation and procurement of some of the benefits which flow from the move to renewables. So I think that committee, once it really settles in and starts to concentrate on that very point of helping direct the benefits which flow from renewables, I think it will become increasingly important within council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Any further debate, councillors? There being none, there'd be no need for a right of reply. Councillor Ivey, no. I now put the motion. Electronic voting is now open. Now close the voting. And we declare the motion carried unanimously.
Seconder, then go to the conflict.
Okay, thank you. IPEC 25/44, the development activity summary. Do I have a motion for the activity? Yep, thank you, Councillor Richardson. And a seconder, Councillor Wright. And Councillor Toynton, would you like to declare your conflict? Yep.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I have a significant non-pecuniary conflict of interest in this matter, IPEC 25/44. I am very good friends with the Centre Manager of Arana Mall, who has a development application discussed in these. So while this is being discussed, I will leave the room to remove any perception of a conflict of interest.
Thank you. All right. Councillor Richardson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Mr Chair.
Okay. There being any further debate, councillors? There being no further debate, we'll to open the electronic voting. Thank you, councillors. I'll now close the voting and declare it passed unanimously. Can we get Councillor Toynton to return to the room, please? IPEC 25/45, the Renewable Energy Projects Update, July 2025. Do I have a motion? Councillor Wright. And a seconder, please. Councillor Black. I now call on Peter Dwyer to address the meeting regarding this item. And 5 minutes, they'll be allowed to speak.
Thank you, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of the Stop Hampton Park Solar Group, a number of which are here tonight in relation to IPEC 2545 and also in relation to the planning arrangements. Councillors, I wish to draw your attention to the content of the intent behind the projects you discussed tonight. That being, how much can council extract from these projects if they proceed, and how will you spend the money? The community grant scheme used in dispensing renewable energy council taxes is unfair and misdirected. Those that bear the disruption of lifestyle, loss of land value, and become general collateral damage from these projects receive no compensation. But the community in general get new basketball courts, school improvements, upgraded roads, etc., etc. The loss of land values to landholders near renewable energy projects will far outweigh the income received by council. For example, with the Hampton Park SESS, there is no allowance for residents of Bencubbin, Burgrove, Wongarbin, or the affected farmers to receive any compensation for the loss of landscape views, reduction of property values, disruption to lifestyle, without mentioning the destruction of prime agricultural land. None of the above receive any compensation whatsoever. Yet council receive $850 per megawatt per year for solar component and $150 per megawatt per year for the battery component. Those figures come out of your council papers from tonight. How is this fair? Councillors, please stop treating these projects as cash cows. The meat, wool and grain produced from this land is much sweeter than the dirty dollars from renewable energy. And they are dirty dollars because they are flowing into council's coffers at the expense of the affected ratepayers. Councillors, don't be caught on the wrong side of history here and be remembered as the council that ruined the countryside around Dubbo. There are enough out there already trying to do that. Councillor, we have personally invited you all to come and meet us on site in order for you to understand the dilemma that we are about to face. And we even offered to pay for your transport. We issue that invitation in person again tonight. Councillors, with apologies to John Fitzgerald Kennedy, ask not what you can get from the renewable energy companies, but ask what you can do for your constituents. Thank you.
Sorry, we can't have any clapping from the gallery. Thank you. So back to the move of the motion, which was Councillor Wright. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I actually had a question first that I just wanted to put forward, just with respect to the VPAs. Actually, I'll go back a step first. With regards to the renewable energy zone itself, I'm just wondering if you might be able to clarify for maybe myself and those listening at home, how many of these projects that we're seeing, there's a lot of them on the ground at the moment, how many of these projects are actually RES projects as such, or RES classified, and maybe how they are classified or otherwise as RES projects?
Okay. To the CEO.
Yeah, Mr. Jennings.
Through you, excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. The Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone and RES projects. There's 10 candidate foundation generators, which are projects that will or that are proposed to connect to the new transmission line, which just comes into the north eastern section of our local government area, up at the top. The remaining projects, so I think there's 23 in the list there tonight. They are proposed to either connect to the existing Transgrid network, which has a substation in Wellington, or the Essential Energy network with the transmission line that comes through Dubbo as well. So, yeah, 3 RES projects, so to speak. So that's the Spices Creek Wind Farm, the Cabora Solar Farm, and also the Sandy Creek Solar Farm.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Wright?
Yeah, so I guess in essence, there's a significant number of these projects which aren't necessarily classified as RES projects because they don't plug into the Energy Co's new lines. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So they're plugging in like anyone else could. Plugging in, apologies about the poor pun. They're connecting to the existing transmission network, and that can happen in any local government area.
So the other question then was with respect to these VPAs. So maybe you can clarify at what point would council sort of step in and have these discussions with these proponents, and maybe also explain the process if council did support or showed no support, whether there's still be an opportunity for council to express an interest in a VPA to benefit community.
To the CEO?
Yeah, Mr. Jennings.
Through you, Mr. Chair, voluntary planning agreements. I'll start off there. There is a policy setting from the state government, which is $1,050 a megawatt for wind farms and $850 a megawatt for solar farms. Basically, how or the process there is that council has the negotiations with the proponent guided by that policy setting from the state government. Then any draft planning agreement comes here to council for consideration before any consultations undertaken with the community. Also, now we have the Renewable Energy Benefit Committee as well, which will have a role in consultation as well on voluntary planning agreements. Our voluntary planning agreements are guided by our Renewable Energy Benefit Framework, which is the last council adoption of that document was December last year. So that gives us the policy setting of the things that we aim to negotiate and how we guide those negotiations with proponents as well. In respect of VPAs, they're not there for primary impacts of development. They're there for secondary impacts. So primary impacts of development are, are considered by the State Government Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure as part of the state significant development process. VPAs aren't there to offset primary impacts of development in any way, shape or form from that point of view as well.
So just again, clarify, at what stage in the process would council enter into that negotiation with a proponent for a VPA? We're talking just after there may be the scoping phase, post approval maybe of the project itself. At what sort of stage would we enter that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Ordinarily, voluntary planning agreements can take 12 to 18 months from negotiation through to actual execution. So execution is a step after council's done that final consideration at a council meeting in that open and transparent process as well. So when the state government in the consideration of the state significant developments, they will condition ordinarily that council enters into a voluntary planning agreement with a proponent, and then the proponent, before they usually commence work or within a reasonable period of time, the onus is on them to enter into an agreement with council.
So just to clarify then, that the trigger for council to enter into a VPA is actually a state government regulation or a condition of approval of the project, as opposed to council I suppose, forcing that upon the proponent.
through you, Mr. Chair. So the voluntary planning agreement process, it's included in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. That's where it's got its origins from and its legislative backing. Then there is a state government guidance or policy setting around voluntary planning agreements for renewable energy projects as well. So our local policy setting is just to help us and also guide how our negotiations go with proponents and what we need to look at from that point of view as well. The other thing I'll just touch on as well, one key way that we look at our voluntary planning agreements, it's looking around how the funds from those agreements can be spent on projects, and that's community projects within a certain radius of a project. So it's not about having funds from a project in Wellington spent in Dubbo. That's not how we do business with our VPAs.
Mr. CEO?
Yeah, and just to point out, it's separate. It has voluntary planning agreement, but it's separate to the planning process, somewhat to what you've stated, Councillor Wright. So, for example, our history prior to having a framework, a policy setting by council, we had 3 major solar farms approved: Wellington, Wellington North, and Suntop. They got approved. They went ahead, and there was no voluntary planning agreement policy in place. They weren't able to achieve that, so therefore they got their approvals up. The impact was felt by community, but there was no community benefit fund able to be taken from those projects. So it is very separate to the planning. You've got to do it somewhat in parallel. So we think it's a good policy setting because we're actually able to get some funding. We've got evidence before where we didn't have a good policy setting and they got away with it.
Councillor Ivey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following on from comments by Director Jennings and also Councillor Wright, you've talked about the VPA arrangements, but earlier you alluded to some of the, if you like, the more general requirements of expenditure to offset some of the requirements of the development. I'm thinking about, in the case of the Eungella wind farm, Wellington, there was a requirement that the proponent develop and improve the 12-mile road, for instance. I think they spent upwards, $20 or $30 million, I think, doing that. Who sets that requirement? Who says that, for this project to go ahead, this particular infrastructure needs to be looked at or improved or changed or developed? That's separate from the VPA. Where does that fit into the arrangements?
To the CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what happens with a state significant developments, council has an opportunity, there's 2 main opportunities where council can have input into the process. That's after a scoping report has been prepared for a project. That's before the Secretary's environmental assessment requirements are actually prepared. So there's that step there. Also, when the actual application, so that's when a proponent has finished their environmental impact statement and their studies, council also is provided the opportunity to have input into that development assessment process there that's undertaken by the state government as well. To answer your question, Councillor Ivey, when those 2 assessment phases are undertaken by council, that's when we've got the opportunity to have our say and to also make sure that issues, say like 12-mile road, that they're looked at appropriately in the assessment process. But ultimately, they do come down to, they do come down to the state government in the assessment process, making sure that these things are also conditioned in the project approvals as well.
Councillor Ivey.
Thank you. Just to clarify that or to summarise that, if there are conditions that are fair and reasonable to be implemented, then council makes that submission to the state government, and it's the state government's responsibility to set those conditions upon the proponent. Is that right?
To CEO.
Yes.
Councillor Toynton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following on from Councillor Ivey's question, statements about 12 Mile Road and the voluntary planning agreement. So was there a requirement for them to do the entire 12 Mile Road? Like, how do they determine the boundaries of where that work stopped? Is it the entire 12 Mile Road that's in our LGA or this RES thing, or is it simply to the front gate of the project and then stop?
To the CEO.
So the comment on the road, that's what they need for their development. So like any other development, ignoring renewables, just any other development. So that's what they need to consume to enable their development to happen. So that's where you get the development conditions put on the project that way. So very separate from a VPA, which is that higher value, other value add. I might throw to Mr. Jennings for further comment in that regard, or no, comfortable. So that's the logic there. So I'll use roads. I'll use the Spices Creek Voluntary Planning Agreement, for example. So they will need certain roads to access the site to develop their project. It's been approved, and so that's where they will need to upgrade those roads as part of that development. Where we're in a circle with the community in that area around Gollan Hall and with Squadron and Council, is the strategic project at the area is, as some councils would recall, is replacing the causeway with a bridge that's above the 1 in 100. Now, they don't need that road for their development. So that's where the VPA is going to have that uplift in that strategic infrastructure in that community. And that was, to Mr. Jennings' point earlier, about working with that community in that surrounding area. So that's the difference between the VPA funded strategic infrastructure. It's not the soccer shirts funds, as we call it, where it's just trinkets. It's getting a decent upgrade for their businesses, their agriculture business, their transport. And we wouldn't have done that normally. I think in the asset management plan, Mr. Ryan, it's probably about 10 to 15 years away. So that's why that uplift can occur. So that's the difference between a VPA funded and stuff that is required for their development. They need to upgrade that infrastructure to enable their development to happen. And that's where, should the planning department put those conditions on them, that's where we push, that's where that should be addressed that way. I hope that makes sense.
Councillor Black.
Thank you. Just a question. So, where council negotiates these VPAs with a proponent, if we didn't do that and we just oppose the project and the project gets approved, would that be that we don't get any money at all then from that? The VPA, it's lost. So the opportunity, so you can do two processes in parallel. You can negotiate the VPA, so that if it does get approved, you do get some money, but you can still oppose it on the other hand. Is that correct? Through the chair, Tahar?
To the CEO.
Yeah, so that'd be the risk, and certainly it's been realised in our community previously by some of those other larger wind farms. There wasn't a negotiation to do with the VPA, and they've started construction and they've made lots of noises about community benefit funding, but nothing has been realised. I might throw to Mr. Jennings for anything further in terms of the mechanics of if we don't enter a negotiation at the right time, what would happen, for when construction starts, for example.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So where the risk would be is that council and the elected body through the community doesn't have the opportunity to shape what that voluntary planning agreement looks like either. So when a state significant development is considered by the state government, obviously as well, there's the opportunity there that there may be a condition put on for a voluntary planning agreement to be entered into, or there may not be, especially if there's no willingness there from both parties to come together and negotiate through that outcome.
If I could, I'd just reinforce, Mr. Chair, through the chair, that again, just even though it's got planning in the title, it's a separate process to planning approvals, is negotiating out a VPA.
Councillor Black.
Just a comment, thank you. Look, talking to people out there in the community, what people say to me is that there, especially with solar projects, there's not enough, it's the visual amenities the big problem, and there's not enough of that taken into account, and the screening plantings are extremely small, and it doesn't seem to matter how much money gets sort of thrown at a community, it doesn't help those people who are visually impacted, and that's something that the state government as the consent authority really needs to look at. Do you need the solar panels right up to the fence? Do you need them in people's view? And only a 10 metre mixed species buffer is probably not what's required. It probably should be more 50 plus metres. Thank you.
Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think it's important, a couple of points that Councillor Black brought up there, and certainly Councillor Wright and Councillor Ivey as well. In the discussions I've had with people around solar or wind have certainly been sometimes wanting council to do something, and this is one of those issues where you need to understand the differences between our ability to be a consent authority and our ability to do the best thing for the community. And I feel for Mr. Dwyer and the people that I've spoken to for some of the projects around this area, where council has very limited power to do anything to enhance or stop the project. We aren't the consent authority. But I believe it's incumbent upon us as a council representing all 55,000 of our residents to do everything we can to maximise the benefits for our community. So whether we say, yes, we love the project or we think the project's terrible, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever to the approval process. And that's something that I think some of the energy that's being thrown at council, I'd prefer to see some of the residents throw that at the state government because they are the consent authority. From our perspective, we can agree or disagree as much as we like, but we're not going to stop the project because we're not the consent authority. Exactly as Mr. Jennings has said, and has been alluded to by Councillor Black and several other councillors, if we stand there with our arms folded and say we don't want this project to go ahead, we may well miss an opportunity for significant funds for our community, which will benefit, as I say, 55,000. Now, I feel for people directly impacted, so I can understand why they may not be happy because it may be benefiting everyone and not benefiting those people, but we don't have the choice to say yes or no for the benefits for those individuals that are close by. What we do have is the ability to try and maximise the benefits. I think the pioneering work we've done with the framework we put in place many years ago and then updated that after the state government came on board with that framework, I think that is fantastic for our community to benefit the big picture, to benefit the majority of residents, given the fact that some residents are impacted in a negative fashion, but we can't stop that. So it's a confusing one for residents because they want council to be there to fight on their side all the way. But in this case, it's largely irrelevant what we do from a planning perspective, but we have the opportunity to miss out on significant funds. And I think that's incumbent upon us as representatives for all 55,000 residents to make sure we maximise those funds, which I think we have been doing and we'll keep doing. At this stage anyway, our policy setting is that we'll keep doing that to maximise those funds, which again may not be music for the ears of residents here that are against those solar farms, but we can't stop those. All we can do is say, how can we get the most benefit for our residents? And I think we are working on that.
To the CEO.
If I could, Mr. Chair, and I think back to the basis of this report, there's a variety of projects in a variety of stages of the planning system, and there is no guarantees all projects get approved. A lot will, and so to think that many will stop or because of certain positions taken. So, but there is no guarantees of a project. Often early in the planning phase, and it is mentioned in the report, that they've got options on the land, they're exploring feasibility. So I think it is important that for council and community to understand that it is putting in good submissions in terms of addressing the actual problems with that particular project. If you have a broad brush against renewables, it'll get looked at, in my view, by the planning department, but is it actually going to address what a particular project and its concerns are creating? So I think it's about helping community understand how they can feed into this planning process. As Mr. Jennings identified, there's certain key stages where you can have that input and structuring them the right way. And a VPA should be a cost of business. If we don't negotiate a VPA, that's a free kick, and it should be considered as a cost of business, and that may impact their feasibility ultimately as well. So there is some advantages for that way of working as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Councillor Toynton.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following up, when we say voluntary planning agreements, the key word is voluntary. So we could sit there and say, oh, you know, we'd like this, that, and the other X, Y, and Z. These people, whether it be solar, wind, batteries, whatever it may be, they could turn around and say, it's completely voluntary. You lot can go screw, we're going to give you nothing, and we're still going to build it because it's state significant development. So the other thing is we talk about, you know, what's in the best interest of 55,000 residents. I can think of at least 5,000 people that'd be impacted by this, and most of whom are in the gallery tonight know of someone who will be affected by these. So are we essentially as a council saying, oh, it's all right to run rings over everyone and 10% of our population can go to buggery? That is just not good enough. I think we really, really need to fight this. for the best interest of the entire community. And if anyone's going to be disadvantaged, it's not to any benefit to the community. We need to make sure that we can get everyone satisfied. And if there's no way of having everyone satisfied, then what's the good of pursuing a voluntary planning agreement if that's the biggest kicker to this, and it's ultimately voluntary? Then where do we lie with that? Like, we can't enforce them to something that's voluntary. They can say, "Oh, this is a gesture of goodwill," but ultimately we've got no way of enforcing that. So how do we address the concerns of the community that are going to be affected? And it's a large portion of the community, both population-wise and area-wise.
To the CEO.
So where the planning system is at the moment, I think there is an expectation. It's only a guideline they've issued, so there is a lack of compulsion. But we'll ask Mr. Jennings' comment about if we negotiate in good faith to get to something that matches the guidelines, I would suggest that will be looked on favourably, and the proponent will be looked on very negatively by the people doing the planning assessment in the state government. Mr. Jennings, talk through that, please, to that question from Mr. Councillor Toyne.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, 3 or 4 years ago, when Wellington North and Sontop and the other extension project next to Wellington North were approved, the state government didn't require solar to have a voluntary planning agreement in place. So that's why we missed out as a council and as a community as part of that process. So the state government has come further. So back at that time, wind was the sort of project type which definitely required that planning agreement to be in place. But now, with the latest guidance that was December last year as well, from the State Government Department of Planning, there is that requirement to have a VPA in place or a planning agreement. The key thing where, council having those negotiations with the proponent is guiding how these VPAs can be put together, and also the focus and the purpose of these VPAs as well. So, of the 23 projects that we've got in our local government area, there's many nuances around those voluntary planning agreement discussions, especially around different community areas, different areas of our local government area, and also different focuses that proponents would like to have in respect of projects and community benefits as well. So it is a lengthy process, but as Mr. CEO touched on as well, it is undertaken in parallel with the assessment process as well.
Councillor Dickinson.
So to follow there, Mr. Jennings, and on Councillor Toynton's comments, so it's quite the opposite of what Councillor Toynton actually said there. The voluntary, they used to always frustrate me that the voluntary part of that seemed to be very voluntary. Now there is some compulsion to at least have a discussion. And so if we don't participate in that, it seems to me as though a proponent could say to the state government, well, this council refused to discuss with us, so we put on the table an offer of $1 per megawatt, and they've told us to go away very harshly. I won't use the sort of language that Councillor Toynton used, but go away harshly. And in doing that, we've set an offer. And so, well, I suppose they can accept that offer or not, that they won't communicate with us. On the contrary, if we do go in and negotiate in good faith, we've got an opportunity to, as Mr. Jennings says, shape the VPA in what we want it, where we want that money to go, maximise the funds for that VPA. So to me, trying to oppose it and oppose a proponent, with the proponent knowing full well that we don't hold the yes/no tags, we're not the consent authority, not negotiating with the proponent, standing with their arms folded, telling them to go away, they're still going to put something together. They're still going to go to the state government and say, we've gone into this process and we didn't get anywhere, as opposed to negotiate as hard as we can, as we have been doing, to maximise those benefits. That's going to be looked on much more favourably in the planning process from the proponent and from the state government. So it seems obvious to me that we've got to go that way rather than to stand there with their arms folded and say, please go away. I'm not expecting an answer to any of that. That's just more a broad statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson, for your comments. Councillors, any further comments, debates? Councillor Ivey? Yep.
A comment really on the whole process is that, again, as Mr Dwyer said from the public gallery, that some of the neighbours lose out, and that's undoubtedly true. I think part of the problem with this whole renewable development is that the distribution of funds that flow around that the development is inequitable. I mean, we've got the situation where, and we shouldn't really, unfortunately, we can't move away from it. The landowner or the landowners on which these projects are going to be built or constructed were in favour. They either sold or leased or entered into long-term leases with the proponents because they were in favour of their land being used for these purposes in future. And so they're in favour because they get a lot of dollars thrown at them. And I think the trouble is that there are too many dollars thrown at the landowners and not enough dollars thrown at the surrounding community. And that's something which I know we have, as a council, have raised with the state government. And now there are some changes to that, probably not enough, but some changes to that whereby neighbouring landowners can get some compensation from the proponent, not just the land on which, or the landowners on which the development is to take place. So that's certainly something which I think we as a council can continue to do to try to make sure that there's more or better equitable distribution of funds from some of these developments.
Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Councillors, any further debate? If there's no further debate, I might make a question myself. Now, I'm not sure who to address it, perhaps Mr Jennings, but I'd like to ask, let's say council was to unanimously, or at least in majority, agree that we should fight these projects with everything that we can. I've obviously heard the comments that not being consent authorities, that is limiting. I get that. However, I do think that as living in a democratic society, or apparently, we should have avenues, even as a council, in a limited condition, to make it very clear that we are wanting to resist or to not accept. Perhaps there's conditions that council can put on it, like perhaps that a proponent can't meet certain drainage requirements, or perhaps there's pollution conditions or something of that, that we can, in our lane, as it were, make it unattractive for a proponent to look at our area and go, yes, I'd like to put something there. So that the question, that's a bit of a unwieldy question, my apologies, Mr Jennings, but I guess what I would like, if you could outline, if the will was in council to unanimously or majority to resist these, let's be fair, what they are, they're weather-dependent technologies, they're not renewable energies. And I'd like to know, should council make a resolution, for instance, that council will do all in its power to oppose these ruinable projects, how would that look? How could we make that as a council to make it that way? How could we do whatever we can to resist? All right, thank you.
Through Mr Chair, you'd have to, so you could have a broad brush policy setting and that would signal intent, but for each project that goes through a planning approval, you'd have to address each project separately. And to be frank, if you had development conditions and for any development in that regard, if you had conditions that are seen as onerous or not relevant from a technical merit point of view, they would just be ignored by the planning department, in my experience. So in discussing VPAs and what have you, I think I would caution against, like as a body politic, if you chose to oppose more broadly and what have you, I would still seek permission to negotiate a VPA in parallel, because it's the if and then. So if a planning projects will get approved despite a council and others opposing them. And we saw a recent example, and I'll throw to Mr. Jennings for some information on the Valley of the Winds. That's my starting point there. So, Mr. Jennings.
Through you, excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. What ordinarily happens is when a renewable energy project is considered by the state government and the approval pathways that the project goes basically forward to. If a council doesn't support a renewable energy project, the project is considered by the Independent Planning Commission. So it's basically just changes the body that actually considers the project. In respect of the Valley of the Winds wind farm in the Warrumbungle local government area, which was approved back in June, that was a project that was approved by the IPC, the Independent Planning Commission, there as well. So basically, it's changes where the project has its final consideration in that regard as well. And I'll just touch on just another question there from the chair as well, just around conditions and the like. So when the state government considers that planning assessment, so any conditions that council proposes, and obviously any conditions that the state government seeks to put on a project, have to have a planning basis. So under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, conditions have to have that basis in the planning system. So it can't be something that's, and I can't even think of an example at the moment off the top of my head, but yeah, it must have a planning basis from that point of view. And also in a similar nature, when council provides submissions as part of that state significant development process, we also have to ensure our conditions have a planning basis. Otherwise, we run the risk that the condition won't end up appearing in the final conditions of approval for a project.
Okay. Now, I'd just like to, I guess, sorry. Yeah. Councillor Dixon, your question.
Yeah, sorry, leading up from your point there, Councillor Butler, and from Mr. Jennings' comments there, it seems to me that what Mr. Jennings is saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, Mr. Jennings, but we as a council simply can't have a philosophical opposition to renewables across the board. The only way we could oppose them would be by per project, and that would have to be on some sort of actual planning basis, not just a philosophical opposition to that particular project. That sounds like what I heard from Mr. Jennings, without, not trying to verbal Mr. Jennings at all, but from your point of view, if council wanted to have a position of opposition, it sounds like no to philosophical opposition overall, and it also sounds like no to philosophical opposition per project. It would really need to be a planning basis, and that would be difficult, as Mr. Jennings said. He can't think of an example off the top of his head.
To the CEO.
You could have a philosophical position as a council, but know that it would not have any impact on the planning decisions. So you are entitled to have a setting, but it goes to that point of being very clear on, and having well crafted about the impacts of the development. And I'll use one, I won't say it because I've been speaking to a next door neighbour on it, and it's not the speaker's the project nearby them, but another where they're concerned about runoff and they get flooding and what have you. So I think that's a good example of local intelligence saying you'll need to do some flooding studies because there'll be increased runoff. So you need to do that as part of your project and your environmental studies. That will necessarily, if they've got to build like we have to do for residential development, large stormwater basins are very costly. So the true cost of business gets informed by well-crafted submissions by council on the technical things they need to investigate.
Yes, I have another question, perhaps to Mr. Jennings. Understanding about the a planning basis for the objection and a condition to be placed. One I can think of is pollution. I think it's becoming fairly well known that the wind towers do emit quite a lot of pollution, up to 60 kilos a year of BPA-based resins. Is that something that we could use as a, like let's say, for instance, I'm just thinking out loud, but if we said one of the conditions that we would ask the consent authority to place is that we enforce, or not enforce, how would you put it, but to implement a pollution detection regimen or something like that. Is that something we could do so that there would be detectors to show when there's a, let's say, a pollution event from a wind industry? I won't call them a farm because farm actually puts it in a positive light, but if this wind industry, is, as has been shown by various international experts, to create large amounts of very toxic pollution, could we use that as a planning basis in order to place a condition that is based in reality, so to speak? Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Through Mr. Chair, it needs to be, so the department has, the planning department will refer to other agencies who have that specialist skill. So I would suggest that the science is not accepted as you describe in terms of pollution from wind turbines. There was a study at a university. It's been extrapolated by others and recounted by others. But that's where you could call out concern. I'll talk more broadly, not about that circumstance. And that's where the agency with specialist expertise would provide that input. And the EPA and PFAS is but one current example that way. So you do it more about, particularly the first stages, and that's informing the CERs, is those areas of concern that need to be investigated as part of those environmental studies that inform a potential conditions of development, if that makes sense. But I would caution, the government will rely on accepted science from their agency's perspective.
Yes, and I think that is certainly the, how would you call it, the point of contention is that who accepts the science. So maybe this is more of a comment, but something I've noticed is that the science that supports the renewable energies is almost invariably related to the people who benefit financially from those same industries. And so I unfortunately would tend to see that science as compromised. And unfortunately, we do seem to see our higher echelons submitting to that science. And often I think it's the follow the money trail is definitely where these things end up. So yes, I understand it's maybe not what we call accepted science per se, but I would suggest, after having a look at both sides of the argument, that the actual genuine science, which is not influenced by the financial incentives of these large corporations, actually the independent science shows the large-scale damage that these projects will, I believe, eventually inflict. And unfortunately, for those who are in these areas, they're the ones who will be most affected by it. And certainly, maybe it's more of a comment again, but I have heard of people refusing knighthoods and refusing other honours out of, such, I think if we do have a cause, I think that we should indeed use that cause. I think for instance, give an example, if we were to receive benefits from a slaving industry, I think everyone here would agree with me that that would be wrong. And that we would, even if it meant that we could have a new road, we would say no, because it's at the expense of children and people who are being exploited, their labour, and not being rewarded. Now, I see this as a similar thing. We're having people being exploited and afflicted, damaged, loss of income, loss of property, loss of whatever, and we seem to be happy to sit idly by and watch the freight train go by. And I would like to say and encourage all my councillors that there is a point of right, and that that is actually a just cause is worth following, despite the financial penalty that would become to us. Because I think at the end of the day, we're here to serve the people, not to make a sham of serving ourselves, which I do believe these trinkets of so-called funding, how would you call it, compensations, nowhere in any way come close to compensating for the damage that this will do, which I believe is irrevocable. And in 20 years' time, when we look back and we go, that was a big mistake, we're going to really regret it. So, I mean, councillors, I would encourage you, even at the cost of losing VPAs.
Point of order, Mr.
All right.
Chairman. I thought we were debating the motion about the renewable energy projects and the list of the energy projects in our LGA. Councillor Butler, you've raised some points which may well be valid, but surely here is not the point to raise those. Surely it is a matter of bringing a notice of motion to council, outlining what you want this council to vote on and do. Why are we? I cannot see the relevance of you debating that here, and you really are debating it under the auspices of this particular motion that we're supposed to be dealing with.
Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Yes, I guess the instigation is Mr. Dwyer's comments, which I think are very pertinent to this debate.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Another point of order. You've got to rule on the point of order first. That's your first thing, because Councillor Ivey's raised a point of order. You need to rule as a chair on the point of order that he's raised.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's up to me as a ruling, I'd say overruled. If you want me to be specific and blunt, but yes, I think it's very relevant considering Mr. Dwyer's comments today, and
That's all I need to say.
that's all I need to say. Yes, that's right. All right, and I think I've said my piece. And please, I do ask our council to do whatever they can to resist these energies. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Wright, would you like to have the right of reply to your original motion that you moved?
I think enough has been said. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I now put the motion, which was the report of the team leader growth planning projects dated 25 be noted, and the status of renewable energy projects and planning agreements attached be noted. If I could open the voting. Yep. All right. And I think that's everyone. I'll just close the voting. Voting's closed and carried unanimously. Moving along to IPEC 25/46, Draft Planning Agreement, VPA 24-003, Kerrs Creek Wind Farm, yes, wind industry. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councillor Ivey. And do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. Okay. And Councillor Ivey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But perhaps before I do, is it in order for me to just ask a couple of questions in relation to the Kerrs Creek development? The two questions are related. One, dealing with the VPA, what can I ask through the chair to the CEO? What has been the process and the status of the negotiation with the community about the VPA? And secondly, the question goes back to the point I raised earlier with respect to this particular development. What do we know? What some of the bigger planning requirements may be that the state government may impose on this particular project? Have we got any idea of what they may be?
To the CEO.
I'll pass to Ms. Smart.
So currently the process has been that the proponent has undertaken consultation with the community and has approached council to enter into a planning agreement, voluntary planning agreement. A couple of months ago there was a report to council based on a cost of value of works of the 1%. And that was resolved to be not supported. And so we've gone back to the proponent and requested that they come in back with an amended letter of offer in accordance with our guidelines, the 1050 per megawatt, and that's what this report is proposing. In regards to the projects that have been, or the development approvals for certain projects that would need to be undertaken, and I'm assuming you mean such as like road upgrades. Yep, I'll have to ask Mr. Jennings to answer that.
excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair, the current status of the Kerrs Creek Wind Farm, they haven't yet lodged their scoping report, so it's still early-ish. Excuse me, frog in the throat. It's still, fairly early days in the assessment process. We will obviously have further discussions with the proponent and also with the State Government Department of Planning around those sort of more in-depth details, especially around traffic, obviously, about how KIC gets to site, then also around visual impacts, housing as well, about how that's going to work, and obviously impacts on biodiversity, stormwater drainage, all of the sort of normal assessment processes that happen as part of a state significant development. So yeah, to answer your question, Councillor Ivey, it's this project's nowhere near the approvals stage, but yeah, it's basically a work in progress in respect of assessment and working with the proponent.
Councillor Ivey?
And just a follow-up question from that. So I understand from that once that process gets a little bit further developed, the third part of this motion, which I'm proposing, the draft planning agreement and explanatory note prepared in accordance with the terms identified in this report, it'll be placed on public exhibition, so the public will have the opportunity to make comment in relation to that, and that will then come back to this council for final approval. Is that my understanding correct?
To the CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So the from council's consideration here tonight, and obviously from the council meeting in 2 weeks' time as well, we will finalise negotiation of a draft, and I use that word very clearly, draft planning agreement with the proponent. Then what happens, there's at least a 28-day public exhibition process, which is required by planning legislation as well. As part of that public exhibition process, what we will be doing with the community and also through our new Renewable Energy Benefits Committee is talking with the community about how we can best structure this voluntary planning agreement, what their community needs are around the project area as well, and how we can best work together to come up with the best structure for this agreement. Following that process, you're right, a report will come back to council for consideration in an open council meeting, obviously, as well, where council can look at the results of that public exhibition process and how we've looked to shape that final agreement.
Thank you.
Councillors, is there any further debate? Thank you, Councillor Toynton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just looking here at, pardon me, page 26 of the report. Says that this is not approved yet, this project. So I'm wondering if it's actually appropriate for us to be debating entering into negotiations for a VPA for something that may or may not go ahead. The other thing that's mentioned on page 27 is the installation, operation, maintenance and decommissioning of the Kerrs Creek Wind Farm. So I'm just looking at this. We've got 63 turbines at 280 metres in height. So who wears the cost to dispose of all this stuff at the end of its working life when it's decommissioned? And how will it be disposed of and decommissioned?
To the CEO.
Two things. Just remember conditions of approval, which would include decommissioning, and Mr. Jennings will give an update on some of the latest approvals that have occurred in our area and how that's captured there, is separate to the voluntary planning agreement. So as we've discussed previously, this is negotiating if it does get approved, and there's certainly no guarantees whether it gets approved in planning or whether it stacks up as a feasible project. So this is negotiating in parallel as something goes on its journey through the planning system as well. So that's that discussion we've had previously. So they're quite distinct and separate processes. In terms of the decommissioning, what have you, Mr. Jennings, I think there's been some recent projects, Ungula Spices perhaps, where the state government has starting to impose those types of conditions.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. So the State Government Department of Planning does have decommissioning requirements which are now in respect of wind farms. They're in the large scale wind energy guideline. And apologies if I don't get the name exactly correct. Also, there's a solar version as well of the same guideline, which has those requirements in it. From my memory, the Spices Creek Wind Farm SSD, so the actual the development does have conditions around decommissioning that project as well. So it is obviously one of those key requirements that is well considered by state government now in projects as well. In respect of obviously who does that that decommissioning, that basically comes down. It's a conditioned part of the approval that comes down obviously to the agreements between proponents and also the actual landowner in respect to that process.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Is there any further debate from the councillors or questions? There being none, we will put the motion and open the electronic voting. If you would cast your votes. Thank you, councillors. I'll now close the voting. And we will declare the motion carried unanimously. IPEC 25/47, the D25 167 shop alterations and additions, and I'll just put the rest as read. Do I have a motion for this? Councillor Black, yep, and seconded Councillor Wright. And could I ask Councillor Toynton to mention his conflict at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a significant non-pecuniary conflict of interest in this matter. I'm very good friends with the Centre Manager of Arana Mall, Mr. James Wall. While this would have no effect on my decision making this evening, I will remove myself from the room to remove any perception of a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Toynton. So, Councillor Black, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, it's all right, thanks.
All right. Is there any further debate? Councillor Dixon, yep.
This is significant because this is our first, Mr. CEO knew exactly where I was going with this. This is our first DA that we're approving at a committee. Before we always had to approve DA to council as a council meeting, not a committee meeting. I am interested to see how many lodgement days and assessment days this particular DA was within council. I'm not sure if you know lodgement days off the top of your head, Mr. Jennings. Might be a good one for you. But I'm interested to see, to prove the point that council staff wanted to have that flexibility of bringing DAs to council twice a month rather than once a month. Again, this is an example of exactly what council staff are after. So I'm interested to see those particular stats there while Mr. Jennings looks those up quickly for me.
Mr. Jennings, did you wish to have a moment? Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the DA was lodged on the 22nd of April 2025.
Sorry, further, Mr. Chair. So the lodgement days, do you have the lodgement days there off the top of your head? How many days for the, at our league table has lodgement days and assessment days? Do you have the lodgement days for that one?
I'd have to take it on notice. Sorry, Councillor Dickinson, I don't have that.
Right, so April to July. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep. All right. Councillors, is there any further debate or questions, comments? No. There being none, we can put the motion to the electronic voting. Is that everyone? Yep. Okay, I'll just close the voting and declare it carried unanimously. Can someone get Councillor Toynton to return to the room? I'm getting it. Okay, thank you. IPEC 25/48, Planning Proposal R25-004, Amendments to the South East Urban Release Area Map. Do I have a motion? Councillor Richardson? And seconder, please. Councillor Wright? So, Councillor Richardson, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any further debate, councillors? There being none, I'd like to start the voting. And we'll now close the voting. And we can declare the motion carried unanimously. The next item for consideration in Infrastructure Planning and Environment Committee is deemed by the Chief Executive Officer to be confidential. Can I now have someone move to defer item IPEC 2549, John Gilbert Water Treatment Plant, gravity filter penstock valve replacement, to be dealt with at the end of the Corporate Services Committee in the confidential session? Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Seconded, Councillor Cowley. And Councillor Ivey, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair.
I'll take that as prophetic. Thank you, Councillor Ivey. And any further debate? There being none, I'll open the voting. Please cast your votes. And just closing the voting. And we can declare the motion carried unanimously. As there are no further items, I declare the Infrastructure, Planning and Environment Committee closed, the time being 6:41 p.m. Thank you.
I now open the July 2025 Culture and Community meeting, the time being 6:43 p.m. First item is CCC 25/29, leave of absence. I have a request for leave of absence from Councillors Chowdhury and Ryan. Can I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Cowley. Thank you. I now put the motion to electronic voting, which is open. Please cast your votes. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. Councillor Wells is attending via audio-visual link.
Mr. Mayor, just a minor point. I know we had the debate several months ago about the chair not chairing. Do you want to just give an explanation to the public as to why you're chairing rather than Councillor Wells, using our new code of meeting practice that we came up with?
I can. So Councillor Wells is absent tonight, but joining on audio-visual link, and it's very difficult to chair a meeting with the delay and not being able to see the whole room, etc. So I'm here to chair. Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Next item is CCC 25/30, conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest to declare? No, carry on. None. We move on. Next item is CCC 25/31, report of the Sister City Committee meeting 2 June 2025. Do I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Cowley. Thank you. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak to that motion?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That was a rather the first meeting of that particular committee, so it was rather administrative and more process discussions there for that one. So I'm sure the next one will have a bit more chunky and have some more to talk about. I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment or debate, councillors? There being none, I'll open the voting on that. Please cast your votes electronically. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. The next item is CCC 25/32, 2025-2026 Aquatic Leisure Centre fees and charges and season length. Councillor Ivey has a motion to move.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor. I'll like to move that the Council determine the Aquatic Leisure Centre fees and charges be increased by 2.4% for the 2025/26 season to align that increase with CPI. That Council approve the current season lengths for Dubbo Aquatic Leisure Centres 33 weeks and at Wellington Aquatic Centre 31 weeks and Geary Pool 18 weeks. And 3, Council note that the season lengths may be extended at Belgravia Leisure's discretion dependent upon prevailing weather conditions and training requirements for national/state swimming championships.
A seconder for that. Councillor Wright. Councillor Ivey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that some increase in charges aligned with CPI is justified. Belgravia, as operators of our aquatic centres, also receive a payment from council, an annual payment. That payment is subject to the contract arrangements which were entered into at the beginning some 2 or 3 years ago. And council does have the power within that contract, though, to set the fees for the entry fees into our aquatic centres. I think that I know that we've had some problems with the management going right back. I think generally, as I understand it, Belgravia is working well with council, that most of those initial teething problems have been overcome and that the last season things went reasonably well. I think it's a good that council has developed a good working relationship with Belgravia and to allow them to receive extra fees from the entrance fees just in line with CPI is tantamount really, or is an indicative, I suppose is a better word, indicative of council's requirements and council's desire to work closely with Belgravia to get the best result for our community. Just following on from that, or perhaps the last comment I would like to make is that I would trust that given this increase in entry fees which council would vote upon, that given that increase that Belgravia would do the right thing by our community, and if the demand is there, as exhibited by users of the Wellington pool, that the season length for Wellington be increased from 31 weeks to 33 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Toynton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to foreshadow an amendment that council determine there be no increase to the Aquatic Leisure Centre fees and charges for the 25-26 season. 2, that council approve the current season lengths for Dubbo Aquatic Leisure Centre, 33 weeks, Wellington Aquatic Centre, 31 weeks, and Geary Pool, 18 weeks. 3, council note the season lengths may be extended at Belgravia Leisure's discretion, dependent on prevailing weather conditions and training requirements for national state swimming championships.
Thank you. So Councillor Toynton's foreshadowed that motion, which would be 2 and 3 the same, but with 0% increase in entry fees to the pools. Thank you. Further debate? Councillor Cowley.
Could I just clarify that any increase goes in its entirety to Belgravia? Council doesn't pocket any of those fees?
To the CEO for all the ins and outs of that.
Yeah, well, I'll throw to Mr. Arms, responsible for the contract.
Through the chair, yes. So, as per the contract, all earnings from the facility is retained by the contractor.
And
Councillor Cowley.
sorry, supplementary question. Last year, did the fees go up?
To the CEO, Mr. Arms.
Yes. So last year, council endorsed a 9% fee increase, as per Belgravia's request, which was in line also with council's fee increase overall on average.
Councillor Cowley.
Thank you.
Further debate, councillors. Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Wells. Oh, you go, then Councillor Wells.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm happy to support the motion put forward by Councillor Ivey there. I know that one of our directors has just mentioned the large increase last year of 9%, and it can be argued that we didn't do nothing this year. But look, there's certainly that 9% just offset a lot of those massive costs that every business and every household faced last year with cost of inflation. So look, that 2.4% aligning with I guess council's increase to many of their fees and charges, and whilst it might be a bit of a populist decision to say zero increase. And we'd love to say zero increases for all of our fees and charges for community, but I still think it comes back to finding that middle ground for all parties, just to ensure the financial viability of the facility for the contractor and for the community going forward. So I'm happy to support Councillor Ivey's motion there.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just interested in why there is a difference between the terms for Dubbo, Wellington and Geary. I can understand Geary being 18 weeks, but I don't understand the difference between 33 and 31 for Dubbo and Wellington. Is there any reason why it can't both be the same as 33?
The CEO.
I'll throw to Mr. McAllister.
Through the chair, traditionally Dubbo has always had a slightly longer season than Wellington. That was largely because of the need for the swimming clubs to allow their swimmers to train for state and national. The year that just finalised, there was a reduction at the Dubbo Aquatic Leisure Centre to allow for the plant room refurbishment, and as a result of that, Wellington was extended for 2 weeks. Belgravia felt that worked quite well, and so that's why they've offered it. The opportunity to extend it for another two weeks to bring Dubbo and Wellington in line together. But traditionally, Dubbo always had about a 2-week longer season than Wellington.
Councillor Wells, anything further?
I would be more in favour of having equal time terms, for both Dubbo and Wellington.
Thank you.
I'm not in a position to make any changes because being virtual is too difficult.
Thank you. The CEO for further advice on the contract.
Yeah, I might just to Councillor Wells' point, I'll just get Mr. Arms to describe if that's possible in the contract to control the opening and closing hours of the different facilities.
Through Mr. Chair. So yes, it's one of the powers that council does have under the contract. One is to set the minimum and maximum fee charges for admission and other general fees, not the kiosk or the slide, important to note, but also the season lengths and opening hours as well. But certainly the intent of Belgravia, I would say, is to remain open for as long as it's as there are people willing to swim as the season transitions to more cooler. It's that balance between meeting demand but also running an expensive operation as well. So certainly their intent is to be there to provide a facility rather than to not.
Thank you. Councillor Wells, anything further from that? We'll take that.
Is that, sorry?
Yep, go.
It's a bit of a delay. Yeah, look, no, I'm happy with that. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate, councillors? I'll have a quick say. CEO. I'll have a quick say. I can't vote for the increase for Belgravia. They're getting $1.487 million a year, plus they get the canteen and the slide and the entry fees, and that 1.478 went up 4.08% the first year. It'll go up 3.81%. It'll then go up 3.65 and 1.06%. And the entry fees, look, they went up 9% last year, and now there's a proposal for a further increase. It might be at inflation, but look, Dubbo Council ran the Dubbo pool at, broke even a few seasons ago, and most of that came from the canteen. And having seen how the canteen at the Dubbo pool is run, there's a lot of room for improvement there from Belgravia, rather than just take what many would consider the lazy option of slugging entry, and they might need to look at some of their processes there to get that functioning a lot better, and to actually make the money from the people who buy all the chips and scallops and those sort of things. The other thing to note is that every time you put up the pool entry, you probably decrease the patronage, and you get into a bit of a spiral where it's like, oh, it's too dear to go to the pool, so I won't go to the pool. And then the pool's saying, oh, we're not getting enough people through the gate, so we need to put up the price. And you end up with no one going there. And I've noticed the City of Newcastle with their $2 entry fees for all but one of their pools that they're going to trial for next season. So, look, it looks like there's a fair bit of money, extra money coming the way of the Belgravia anyway, so I can't vote for even the 2.4% increase that Councillor Ivy's proposed, and I'd support if this motion doesn't get up, I would support the foreshadowed motion of Councillor Toyton for the reasons just stated. Councillor Dickerson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify something you said there. I don't remember the pool ever making money when it was managed by a council, and certainly not in the recent years. And when we made the decision in 2023, it was because we were losing so much money that we looked for something external. So just that one point there, which is an important point you made in your comments there, I'd just like to get some clarification, either from yourself or from Mr. Arms, about us actually making a profit with the pool, because I don't remember that being the case.
Noting that I didn't say that we made a profit.
My recollection was that we made money on the pool in previous years, is what your comment was.
No, break
even, sorry.
Yep,
I take that back. Okay, let me rephrase that. Can we get clarification on that? I don't remember the pool ever breaking even in our previous management of the pool in the previous term, which is why in 2023 we went out to Belgravia, because we were losing money every year during that process after we took it back over. So some clarification on that would be appreciated.
That was on the three pools in total. The Dubbo pool just about broke even 1 year there. The Geary pool and the Wellington pool ran at a significant loss, but the Dubbo pool broke even within a hair's breadth of breaking even, mostly from the canteen.
So that's still not breaking even. Within a hair's breadth is not breaking even, but I wouldn't mind hearing from Mr. Arms about the breaking even status of the Dubbo pool, given the fact that this contract is for all three pools, and it's important our contract is viewed across all three pools, because that's the contract with Belgravia. It might put Mr. Arms in an uncomfortable position there, but the facts. Ma'am, I'm after the facts.
We'll take that on notice and get back to you with the actual figures before the next meeting. Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Butler.
Yeah, I think I'd just like to echo Councillor Toynton and Councillor Black. I am quite concerned whenever I've looked into the Wellington swimming pool, hardly anyone in it. And certainly from a personal point of view, my attendance at the pool has definitely declined in proportion to the increase in fees of entry. I think I read $7.50, $7.70. And I mean, okay, that's a casual entry, I get that. But I would certainly be classified as a casual swimmer. But certainly I see it as a deterrent, and I don't know. I think I would be more in favour of Councillor Toynton's motion. But perhaps even there may be a possibility of, I think, as you alluded to, even reducing the entry fee rather than going for an increase. I know that obviously means that it costs council more money. As we mentioned before, the pools have not really run at profits per se. But I guess with the council it's not a profit motivation; it's a service to the community motivation. And I'm assuming we don't make much money in our parks and other things that we mow or that we service. So I guess I would rather see the pool utilised at a $2 entry fee than at hardly anybody in there to even break the water at $7.70. So I know that would then imply a significant cost, but as a council, that is par for the course in that sense, to provide the community a service. There's not much point if it sits there and isn't being used. So I think I would definitely favour Councillor Toynton's at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Further debate, councillors? There being none, we'll go back to the mover of the original motion for a right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments. Councillor Butler said he looks in the pool and he very rarely he doesn't see many people in there. I would dispute that. I think the pool is providing a really good service to a number of people within the community, and it is used. I think some of the other comments about the cost or the cost to council, the payments to Belgravia that were made, that they're getting all this money, that was a debate we had 2 or 3 years ago. It was decided that Belgravia would be entrusted with the management of the pool at that cost. So I think that's literally sort of water under the bridge. That's gone. I'd be much more inclined to see that Belgravia are provided a little bit of incentive, and as I said before, in working with council in trying to provide the best possible facility we can offer, and that means that if the entry fee goes up by inflation, or perhaps even a little bit less than inflation, I think that's to be desired. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, before I put this motion, just a quick reminder. So this is for Councillor Ivy's 2.4% increase, with the foreshadowed motion by Councillor Toynton, which would be dealt with if this one was lost, of a no increase. So we're voting on the 2.4% increase. Councillors, I have opened the voting. Please cast your votes. Councillors, I'll now close the voting. Motion lost 3 votes to 6. Now we go to Councillor Toynton's foreshadowed motion. Councillor Toynton, could you please read that out again for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the motion is that council determine there be no increase in the Aquatic Leisure Centre fees and charges for the 2025-2026 season. 2, that council approve the current season lengths for Dubbo Aquatic Leisure Centre, 33 weeks, Wellington Aquatic Centre, 31 weeks, and Geary Pool, 18 weeks. 3, council note that the season lengths may be extended at Belgravia Leisure's discretion, dependent on prevailing weather conditions and training requirements for national/state swimming championships.
Thank you. You have moved that. A seconder. Councillor Richardson was first. Councillor Toynton, speak to your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think that with a company like Belgravia, who actively goes out and says, we run pools, that's all they do, they would have to have some kind of understanding as to what it costs to run a pool, the costs of chemicals like chlorine, machinery, etc., etc. Now, good business would say that inflation is something that affects everybody. It's always going to be there. It's sitting around 3% plus CPIs. Now, if they didn't factor that in with their original quote, that's poor business. Now, the other thing is they had a 9% increase last year, as was revealed earlier when we were debating Councillor Ivy's motion. So I don't believe the people of our LGA deserve to be stung for any extra costs to use their pool when this was supposed to be in everyone's best interest. So I believe that no increase is more than fair and reasonable.
Thank you. Further debate, councillors? There being Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just mainly to support what Councillor Toynton's actually said. I know 3% doesn't sound like a lot to people, but when you've got a young family and you're doing it very hard, that can be the difference between you going to the pool or not going to the pool at all, and having family time. And I think Belgravia get enough. Like, they get all the takings from the canteen, all the takings from the slide, all the takings from the gate. And I'm a bit like Councillor Black. I've heard a lot of comments about the canteen and the quality and quantity of food that's been distributed there. And I don't think they should be rewarded with an increase. I think they should have to work for their next increase. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Further debate, councillors? There being none, Councillor Toynton, right of reply to anything Councillor Richardson said?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just following on what Councillor Richardson said about people being discouraged from using the pool with an increase in fees, at what point do the youth of our region get some exercise when the state government ripped away the sports hub? Are we going to sit there and make it even harder for people to exercise by increasing the fees for a pool? So no, we need to take charge, and an increase in fees is not the way of going about it.
Councillors, I have opened the voting on Councillor Toynton's motion for 0% increase. Councillors, I'll now close the voting. Carried 7 votes to 2. The next item is CCC 25/33, 2025 to 2029 Youth Action Plan. Do I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Cowley, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Wright. Councillor Cowley, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that it's a great report, that the youth of our city are making some great strides forward, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can achieve in the years to come.
Thank you. Further debate, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to say well done to the 290 young people who participated in the survey. Obviously, they're showing a strong interest in the future of the city in which they live. And I know there was a lot of key points that were brought up, and many of those have been addressed in that particular report that we're looking at tonight. So well done, and thank you to the youth for contributing to that.
Thank you. Further comments or debate, councillors? Councillor Wells online.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to also mention that in terms of the youth committee, that we've got some really strong co-chairs on the youth committee, and I wanted to do a shout out this week where one of our co-chairs, Brendan Fernando Fuller, led the Welcome to Country at the Dubbo's NAIDOC Day. So it's just shining a light on what's coming out of the youth committee. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Further councillors? There being none, we'll go back to the original mover for a right of reply to anything there. Councillor Cowley.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillors, I will now open the voting. Please cast your votes on that motion. I'll now close the voting. Carried unanimously. As there are no further items, I declare the Culture and Community Committee closed, the time being 7:08 p.m.
I now open the July 2025 Corporate Services Committee meeting, the time being 7:09 p.m. I have a request for leave of absence from Councillor Shibli Chowdhury and Councillor Adam Ryan. Could I have a moved by Councillor Kelly and seconded? Councillor Toynton. I'll now put the motion to the electronic vote. I'll now close the voting. And the motion's passed unanimously. Item CSC 25/41, conflicts of interest. Does anyone have any conflicts of interest? Okay. Moving on. Item CSC 25/42, draft council policy, communications, media and brand policy. Do I have a motion? Councillor Wright, seconded Councillor Toynton. Councillor Wright, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I don't think so. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Any further debate? I'll now put the motion to the vote. I'll now close the voting. And the motion's passed unanimously. Item CSC 25/43, outstanding actions from council and committees. Do I have a mover? Councillor Ivey, seconded Councillor Cowley. Councillor Ivey, would you like to speak to your motion?
Just perhaps a question. Really, I think it's a great idea having this outstanding actions listed. It serves as a reminder and a bit of a checklist to make sure we keep up to date with what's going on and following on from council motions. A question with the sister city relationship, we decided to explore the possibility of relationships or exchange with Newcastle. Is there any update on where that's up to?
To the CEO?
Beyond what's in the papers, Mr. Arms?
Three Madam Chair. Yes, we have an update coming to council at the August meeting.
Okay.
So the staff are busily. There was about 6 or 7 actions to come out of the last council report, and the staff have been busily actioning that, and we will present that in a consolidated report in August. Is the plan.
Any further debate? Councillor Butler?
Yeah. A question. There's I like Councillor Ivey. Just echo his comments that it is a good thing to have this outstanding report. So that's. I was just maybe it says outstanding actions, standing committees. Does this include outstanding actions from council decisions, or is it just purely standing committee decisions?
To the CEO?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, it covers all. There'll be, look at the top of the titles in blue is the meetings where the detail has come from. So you have on your business papers, 33 is when it starts flipping over to outstanding actions, ordinary council meeting. So it's an attempt to capture all of that. I assure you the governance team worked very hard to get all of that and get the feedback from the relevant staff members as well.
Can I have a supplementary question?
Yes.
Yep. Turn me on. Yes. So then I was just casting my mind back to, I think it was last November at the ordinary council meeting, that I did move a motion for the Wellington Park upgrade in terms of exercise equipment, and that motion was passed at the time. But I don't see that in the list of outstanding actions, and I was wondering why it would be missed. Thank you.
To the CEO.
Without having that direct resolution in front of me, I think you'll find it was considered in the adoption of the budget. So that's why we've moved past that budget, and that's why it didn't go ahead. So that was part of that discussion and workshops and what have you, about here's some notice of motion resolutions, they're the decision that had to be considered as a part of establishing the budget. And there was no decision to put that forward. Council staff can't remember the recommendation for council staff, but that's where that consideration was. So it's met that. It doesn't, is the short answer. So that project was costed, considered as part of the broad brush of all the other notices of resolutions, that had to be considered for adopting as part of the budget. So it wasn't factored into the capital works plan when you adopted the capital works plan.
Okay.
Might throw to Mr. Arms for extra detail on sort of...
That's through you, Madam Chair. That's fundamentally the case. It remains part of our thinking, certainly. There's always sort of infrastructure planning works going on, particularly with our main parks like Cameron Park. Cameron Park also extends over to that patch of land next door to the pool there, and so that's something that we're considering as well. But it's certainly something that hasn't gone away and will be brought to you, I think, in due course as it manifests.
So another supplementary question. So that's good. Should it therefore then be included in the outstanding actions list if it's being considered at some later point even?
To the CEO.
So I'll talk more broadly because I don't have the resolution in front of me. But if it was for consideration as part of the adoption of the 25-26 year budget, that's been considered, and so therefore it's not an outstanding action against the resolution. The specificity of the resolution. Sorry, my tongue's getting dry. So what Mr. Arms was saying, but right, we heard that wasn't adopted as part of the budget, so they've got that thinking in their overall strategic thinking around open space and embellishments in Wellington. So it's in, I guess, a more conceptual, philosophical discussion, but we would have met the resolution if my memory serves me rightly, because the budget has been considered and it wasn't granted capital funding.
So would it be correct to presume that some of these other projects likewise have not, been considered for capital funding for this current year, but they're still mentioned in the outstanding actions?
CEO?
Not sure I'm clear on the question. Are you saying, if I could clarify, Madam Chair, are you saying that there's things here you recognise are in a similar circumstance and they're called out as still outstanding, or are you saying that there are others that like the fitness equipment in Cameron Park, we've adopted the budget, therefore it's been considered and therefore they've dropped off the list? I'm just not sure which way the question was going there. Do you have concerns about what's on the list in front of you or what you can't see on the list?
I guess there's a bit of both in there. So I guess my concern is that we did vote on it, we did pass it as a council, and whilst it may not have made the budget, that wasn't part of the motion. The motion wasn't that in the event that it passes into the budget that it be mentioned in outstanding or something like that. It was just a general, this is what we'd want for Cameron Park, that was approved by council. And my concern is it's dropped off the radar. And so I would like to see it back on the list of outstanding. I just concerned it's getting swept under the carpet as this might happen somewhere in the distant future when everything else is less important or something. That I don't know. It just appears to me that I don't see any good reason why, even if it wasn't approved for a budget, which I get, and that's fine, so it's been deferred, but it still needs to be on the radar. That's my concern.
To the CEO?
So we're talking about, I think, frankly, two different things. This is very much about addressing resolutions and being very accurate in addressing resolutions. We will have future capital works budgets and what have you, and that's the councillors bring forward their community's desires, and you will have to make the necessary compromise decisions about what can be afforded, what can be funded, and what doesn't get cut. So we have opportunities, should you so choose, every 12 months. I think to Mr. Arm's point, I don't think it is swept under the carpet. We had a consideration of adoption of a budget, and we've got a 4-year capital works program. What Mr. Arms has alluded to is, okay, wasn't adopted as part of a budget, but let's think about more strategically, and I know that one was about Cameron Park, but fitness equipment more broadly, and where do people need it? Where's a more appropriate place for it to be well, not a more appropriate, but that will be part of a strategic plan that will be brought to council for further consideration. So I think there's two different things here. This is about addressing directly resolutions, and you will, as councillors, if you've got another few more years in your seat of decision making, thank you, to bring those things forward and consider them again. So, but to Mr. Arm's point, we've got an opportunity now to think about it more holistically in terms of the offering of recreational infrastructure in Wellington as well, which, if hopefully I'm not paraphrasing it correctly, I've just got the nod. That's where Mr. Arms and his team are thinking. So I think that's important. It's about the direct resolution. It's not trying to hide or sweep anything. This is about what's outstanding, what we haven't addressed yet, or we're still a work in progress.
But my understanding was it was a resolution. So
To the CEO.
Yep, but I think the key part, the wording is very clear. If it was considered as the budget, if it doesn't get adopted in the budget, it's not outstanding anymore, because that was about considering it for the adoption in the budget. Council, more broadly, has considered the budget. We had lists in the workshops about notice of motions, what you wanted to consider. And yes, in some ways it's the devil's choice in terms of you've always got to compromise as part of your decision making at council. So I think I need to bring you back. I haven't got any directly in front of me. That's my recollection. It was about that consideration of the adoption of the budget.
All right. Well, could I get us to follow that up, because I don't remember the part about the budget bit. When I brought the motion, it wasn't that we have Cameron Park facilities subject to the budget. It was just a resolution to do this, which was then passed. And so that's why I'm concerned that this appendage to the budget, whilst it's an important practical part of what we're doing, it's not part of the overall, shall we say, vision that we as councillors are part of. So that practical part of I get that, sure. But I understood it to be a resolution, and I don't understand it to have been attached to the budget in terms of the motion being resolved. So I don't, at this point, understand your answer. I know you're trying to say that this budget is why it didn't happen, but I'm trying to make the point that the resolution was passed not tangential to the budget in the sense of by the motion, whilst practically it is, and that's why it should be on the outstanding actions part of those things that haven't been brought to pass because of budget requirements. I get that. But it still needs to be part of the outstanding resolution as such in the resolution.
To the CEO.
We're going to have to disagree on definitions. It was the date and for consideration of the budget was part of the resolution. So I'll send that out. This is a committee meeting. This gets considered in terms of the minutes of this committee meeting at the full council meeting. So I'll be able to provide you that clarity with the exact wordings of the resolution and the why. And so I would suggest it's not interpretation. It's a direct response to action against the resolutions. But you'll have that, take that on notice. We'll get you that direct, what the actual resolution was, just for your consideration in the council meeting.
Is there any further debate? And Councillor Ivey, would you like right of reply?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll now put the motion to the vote. I'll open the voting. I'll close the voting. And the motion's been passed unanimously. The next items for consideration are deemed to be confidential. Under Section 10A of the Local Government Act, the next items being item IPEC 25/49, CSC 25/44, and CSC 25/45 have been identified as likely to be discussed in a closed session of Council. Can I now have someone move us into a confidential session to deal with the items? Councillor Toynton, seconded Councillor Cowley. We have had no applications from members of the public to make their representations regarding whether the meeting should be closed to the public. I will now open the electronic voting. I will now close the voting. Oh, I did it again. No, it's all right. That's been passed unanimously. The streaming will now be turned off and any members of the public will be asked to leave the chamber. The chamber will be reopened and the live stream restarted after deliberations on these matters with the resolutions to be made public. Please stop the web streaming. Committee returned to open session at 7:31 p.m. Welcome back. I now ask the Governance Officer to play the resolutions from the confidential sessions. There are no further items for consideration of the Corporate Services Committee, and I declare the meeting closed, the time being 7:32 p.m. Web streaming has now been completed. Thank you for your attendance, and please stop the web streaming.